US-brokered peace negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians began again in September. It took the US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton months of arm-twisting just to get these two to the table again, but they haven't come that far at all when you consider the ambitious one-year timeframe for a final agreement on a framework or principles. This week, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu offered a freeze on settlement building in the West Bank. A breakthrough, you might think, but only in exchange for Palestinian recognition of Israel as a Jewish state, something the Palestinian leadership rejected immediately. All of this will be familiar to Daniel Kurtzer. He was George W. Bush's ambassador to Israel until 2005. He's currently Professor in Middle Eastern Policy Studies at Princeton University and is here in Australia as a guest of the University of Sydney's US Studies Centre. He joins us in the breakfast studio. Ambassador, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Fran. Thank you.
Daniel Kurtzer, the unattainable holy grail of every US president, in recent times anyway, is really peace between Palestinians and the Israelis. You broke from a lifetime of diplomatic non-partisanship to publicly endorse Barack Obama's run for office. How do you rate his approach to the Middle East peace talks so far, and has he approached this challenge any differently from previous US presidents?
I did support Obama in the 2008 election. The first time in my life I actually became involved in partisan politics because I thought that Obama clearly understood the importance of the Middle East peace process to United States interests. The report card so far, however, is mixed. I think the president and his team, Senator Mitchell, Secretary Clinton, have had a challenging time in defining a U.S. strategy and an approach that might work. We've kind of bounced from settlements freeze to negotiations, and we're now stuck. So I think the important part now is for the president to define what it is he seeks to achieve and then to pursue it vigorously.
Analysts we've spoken to in recent weeks have suggested that the president has gone out further on a limb, if you like, than US presidents before him on this. In your view, watching, and you've seen this close up, is he doing anything differently?
Well, he is in one respect. The focus on what I would call behavior of the parties, in this case the settlements activity by Israel, is very much single-minded. And in the past, when Bill Clinton and other presidents were involved in the peace process, the focus was much more centered on the negotiations themselves, not ignoring the behaviors of the parties, but understanding that they were secondary to trying to bridge the differences on substance. Obama now has to produce some change in behavior in order to justify the investment that he's made in this strategy.
And politically, that could be tricky for him. US Jews, traditionally among the strongest Democrat voters, a massive 78% of American Jews voted for Barack Obama in 2008. A poll out yesterday showed that now only 51% of American Jews approved of the way he was handling the peace process. Why is that? Is it because he's perceived as abandoning Israel? Is it because of his single-minded focus on trying to change the practice as you describe it?
I think there's a combination of at least three elements. Number one, his desire to improve relations between the U.S. and the Muslim world carried him to Istanbul and Cairo, where he gave major speeches. He's not yet visited Israel, and there are some American Jews who feel that this focus is imbalanced. Second has been the dispute with Israel over settlements. It's gotten, in the minds of some American Jews, a little bit carried away, out of hand. And third is the sense that he's not focused as much on Palestinian behaviors, such as incitement, the way in which Palestinian textbooks and public media continue to criticize Israel. So there is some blowback here, and I think Obama is trying now to repair the relationship that he had developed with the American Jewish community because of its political impact in our upcoming midterm elections.
So it looks like paying a cost there in terms of popular opinion amongst American Jewish citizens, and yet the view remains, I think it's fair to say, throughout the Arab and Muslim world, that America, and in the West to some extent, that America is not an even-handed, honest broker. It favours Israel with billions of dollars in military aid, vetoing UN resolutions remotely critical of the occupation. That view still stands too.
Yeah, this is the great irony. We get it from both sides. In this case, Israel and its supporters in the United States believe that the U.S. has tipped in favor of the Palestinians and the Arabs. And the Arab world, as you suggested in the question, believes that we are not a fair and balanced mediator, but that we in fact favor Israel. So it's tough in any situation to be the third party in the middle of two conflicting parties. In this case, we have long experience in being hit in the front and the back by both parties.
Is it essential that America keeps trying, though, keeps putting itself in the middle of that?
I believe it is. I think Obama was right in defining this issue as important for our national security interests. I'd like to see a little more vigor on his part, a little more strategic thinking, but I don't think you can walk away from this peace process. George W. Bush tried that, and our interests in the region suffered rather considerably.
Should he go to Israel and give a major speech, as he has in Cairo and Istanbul?
Why not? Presidents travel all the time. He is a great communicator and a great orator, and I think his presence in Israel, where people could touch and feel him and get a sense of him as a person, would actually help his policies.
It's 4 minutes to 8 on RM Breakfast, and our guest in the breakfast studio is Daniel Kurtzer, who is a former US ambassador to Israel. Daniel, what is your reaction to Benjamin Netanyahu's proposal that was this week that we've just been discussing, that he would extend the settlement freeze on the West Bank in exchange for Palestinian recognition of Israel as a Jewish state?
Well, Fran, the positive side of this is that Netanyahu is clearly looking for a way to keep this peace process alive. By putting forward a proposal, he's indicating that there are conditions under which he would reimpose the settlements moratorium. The problem with this particular proposal is that it's apples and oranges. It doesn't quite meet the need. There is a settlements problem which conflicts with international legality. And then there's a separate question of Israel's self-definition as a Jewish state and the degree to which Palestinians might be prepared to recognize that.
So they should not be traded, in a sense.
One would think that they're not related in a way that would be traded, but as I say, I'm impressed that Netanyahu is at least throwing out ideas, even if they're not realistic.
Some suggest that he's thrown out that idea to complicate the peace process.
Well, it's always possible. There's certainly devil theories that suggest that this is all a game on the part of Netanyahu. I think it's too early to suggest that. His track record on the peace process is mixed, probably more on the negative side. But his words since becoming prime minister and his actions may indicate a different Netanyahu. It's too early to tell.
For that reason, the reason you just outlined, that it has nothing to do with the peace process, that was the retort from the Palestinians who rejected the offer out of hand. Symbolism, though, is at the heart of the pursuit of peace. If that is symbolism, should you think that Palestinians should be a little more open-minded about this, or do you think privately, because Netanyahu himself said he'd been trying to get this idea up behind closed doors, that privately there might be something else going on?
There might be. I tend to doubt it in this case, given the intense focus. I think the media and the public would perceive if there were a back channel or, the famous walk in the woods. I think too much of the negotiations now are taking place through the media. I hope the U.S. and the parties can find a way to get back into the closed room of negotiations. But I'm not impressed that there's a secret back channel that's going to magically appear with a solution here.
Daniel, with only a minute or so to go to the news, I'm going to ask you a question impossible to answer in that time, but you have said it's astounding that nearly 43 years since the 1967 war, the US has not articulated its view on what a final Israel-Palestine settlement should look like on border settlements, Jerusalem refugees. What should it look like?
Well, I've indicated publicly that I think the United States can support the idea of a Palestinian state essentially in the 1967 lines with some swaps of land. There can be two capitals in Jerusalem and a creative solution for the old city. Refugees can find a home in the state of Palestine. There's no reason for them to come to the state of Israel. And security issues can be dealt with both in a creative way, but also in a way that assures both sides see that their future is secure. And the United States can support these positions. Daniel
Kurtzer, thank you very much for joining us on Breakfast. Professor Daniel Kurtzer, former US ambassador to Egypt and Israel, and here in Australia as a guest of Sydney University.